Hello and welcome to the Sideline Live podcast. My name is Orla Keeling and I am the host of the podcast, where every week we bring you a brand new episode with guests ranging from Olympic champions to local heroes, coaches, support staff and anybody involved in the world of sport. Each week we will dive into different topics, including current affairs in sport, identity, skill, mindset, coaching, and also shine a light on those flying under the radar. So tune in for brand new episodes, new stories, and new insights you've never heard before. Okay, delighted to be joined by Bernard Jackman. Bernard, thank you for joining me on the podcast. Good to have you.
Yeah, Orla, thanks for coming on and thanks for all the work you do helping coaches get together and get better. I'm part of your WhatsApp group, and obviously we've come across each other when you were in RT, so delighted to get the chance to do this.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. I was out recently with a couple of people, and I think you had posted a column or something on Twitter, and the person I was with said, who is Bernard Jackman? So I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah, I'm trying to work it out myself. And I was 50 last week, so I still haven't figured it out. It was funny because I do lots of different things, Orla, and sometimes it's hard to actually pigeonhole myself as whatever, a pundit, a speaker, a cattle dealer, leadership. And so I was talking to someone else who's kind of in the same space where they've got lots of little different things going on. And he said, we have to, how we term it is, we've got a portfolio of things, right? Now, that doesn't define me either, but I'm just someone who's been lucky enough to be in lots of different environments where I've been around people, I think, who are trying to build something, create something, have success. And I'm trying to stay in those environments as long as I can. So I'm working with business teams, business individuals, sporting teams, sporting individuals who are trying to create success. And then I'm lucky enough, I'm doing some media. So I have a newspaper columnist on Independent, of 2 podcasts, The 42 and RT weekly podcasts. And I have a contract to work for RT for their rugby coverage on TV, and then Premier Sports as well. So and then I do a little bit of afternoon speaking. So for example, last night I was in the Viva for Leinster Lions for Premier. And then I was the guest speaker at the Cook RFC dinner up in Belfast. So lots of different things, meeting lots of brilliant people and having lots of fun.
Brilliant. Happy belated birthday also. What did you do for the big 5-0?
A couple of us, my best friend, he was 50 on Saturday and I was 50 on Tuesday. So we went down to Castle Palace for a few days with our wives, and just got away on a midweek, Tuesday, Wednesday, and had a few drinks, nice food, and just recognised it. So it was lovely.
Very good. I think I was saying to you before we prepped, or before we recorded here, just in terms of the prep. I do have my notes here to the side if you see me looking off. But what's the biggest? Or sorry, I'll go to that next. But what have you not been asked about yet in terms of the work you do?
Probably the business side of it. Everyone wants to talk about the sporting side of it, and sport's been a huge part of my life. I loved Gaelic football as a kid. Played that until Warren Gatland threatened that they tear up my contract if he found out I was still playing Gaelic football while contracted for my local G8 club, Coolkenno, who actually play in Wicklow. Even though everyone assumes I'm a Carlow man, I'm actually my address is Carlow, but I'm inside the Wicklow border. And then obviously was lucky to be one of the first crop of professional players in Ireland. Actually, the very first year there was contracts given out, I was lucky enough to get one. And then had a very mixed rugby career in terms of went to Connacht, went to Sale Sharks, went back to Connacht, then got back to my home province, Leinster, and finished there. And then obviously went coaching in France and went coaching in Wales. Then pivoted into the real world. I would say I had a 9-to-5 job for 4.5 years. I was working for a company called Reuters, selling market data. Then I went working for a company called Gartner, a big research and advisory firm, multinational. But all the time I was kind of doing more consultancy work around leadership and high performance. So I took a chance, went freelance in late 2022. And yeah, I'd say I've been doing more of that since. So yeah, probably more around what I'm doing with business teams. Really, I don't get asked that much about, but I'm happy to go wherever you want to go.
Yeah. Did you, out of interest, when you went freelance, how did you find leaving the structure? And did you envision to kind of have the portfolio that you have now? Was that always the plan?
That was the aim, but yeah, you don't know how it's going to go, to be honest. And what I needed to prove to myself, and I suppose for financial security, was I could pivot into the real world, if that makes sense. So, like, you hear about players transitioning and how hard it can be to leave the dressing room. I didn't find finishing playing particularly hard because I challenged myself straight away. So I went back and did a master's in UCD in 2010, my first year out. I went coaching in St. Michael's. I was coaching in Clontarf. I did my thesis, which was a challenge for me because it'd been 14 years since I left academia. I went, then I went to France. So you're in a new environment. You're a full-time coach. You're learning a language. So that kind of stimulated me mentally. And then when I got my French up to speed, and I did my pro license over there. So again, that's another challenge. And again, and coaching challenges you anyway because it's especially in France where there's relegation, and we were a team who were our goal was to survive. Was never to be top six or anything like that. It was just survive because we had limited financial means. And then came back, and then what I wanted to do was I was like 40. I was probably 43 or 44, and when I came out of coaching, and um, I wanted to show that I know that I could work in an office or work in a corporate team rather than continue to coach and at 50 leave coaching and try and transition. Not that you can't do it, but there's less people who want to give you a chance. The longer the older you are, and then the level you want to come in at a corporate level. So it was really important for me to do a good stint there. So 4 years, I think, and I'm working for two big multinationals. I think shows that I can do it. And now I know that I suppose I can crack on and do what I'm trying to do. And if I have to go back to a 9 to 5 job, hopefully my CV and my experience will warrant being able to get the right opportunity there. So yeah, there's never been a real plan for me, unfortunately, and I hear lots of high performers and elite people, and they're so detailed on their planning and their goal setting, and I admire that. I haven't had the same kind of structure. I just try and follow my passion, and yeah, if I'm impressed by somebody or a team, I'll kind of jump on board with them, and yeah, and whether that's the right thing or wrong thing, it kind of worked out okay for me.
Yeah, because that was something I picked up on. I kind of had a quote here. You retired in 2010. And it doesn't happen often, but you said, I never for a second looked back. I just moved on, even though I would have loved to have stayed on and I was in a really good environment. I never thought about it for a second once it was over. And you referenced kind of being busy and the benefit of being busy. But, was your, in terms of your childhood and your approach to rugby, was that also a reason why you moved on so quickly? Like, you also worked during your career. Did that give you a
Yeah,
different perspective in going into retirement?
100% order. So like I wasn't a child prodigy when I was doing my leaving cert. Rugby as a career wasn't an option. The economy was pretty tough, so I chose a university degree called International Marketing in Japanese. I did 2 years of that. I was just about to go to Japan for my third year, which would have been 6 months in university there, 6 months work experience, and then come back and do my final year. And rugby went professional. So I kind of fell into professional rugby. I also had a year. So when I came back from sales, so that would have been my fourth year as a professional. I failed a medical with the IRFU. So basically, when I left Ireland, a lot of the Irish team were playing in England. But of course, over the course of that 2 years, Warren Gatland decided that they need to come home. So I was leaving when the others were coming back, if that makes sense. And suddenly, then you're basically isolated over in England, and you're not part of the national setup. So I decided, well, Sale Sharks offered me a new contract. They actually wanted to give me a 3 year contract. Um, and I was like, well, I want to play for Ireland. I hadn't been capped for Ireland. So I said, I'm going to come home. So I turned down the contract. I've been in discussions with Leinster and Munster about a contract and injured myself quite late the season. I had a groin problem and I failed the medical. And I had nothing I had nothing locked in. So basically, I was going to need 6 months rehab. So the provinces weren't willing to take that chance, sign an injured player, which I totally understand. So I went back and got a pharmaceutical job, a sales job in a pharmaceutical company. So I went working as a medical rep for AstraZeneca. Signed, took a year, well, took a contract, took a job with them, and I gave myself a year basically to try and get back into pro games. So rehabbed, stayed fit. Around Christmas time, then I got back playing for Clontarf, and thankfully in April, May, I had an offer from Leinster and Connacht, and I got back into pro rugby. I went back to Connacht, but yeah, like I said, having that year out again, along with the fact that I never thought I was going to be a professional player, kind of always made me realise that it's a very limited window. Just enjoy it, but always have plans for what you're going to do next. Sorry, always be aware you're going to have to do a lot more next. Rather than I didn't have to plan, but I had a little bit of a vague idea around where I wanted to go.
Because that was the other thing in terms of when I heard you listening or kind of speaking about Bernard Driscoll and Paul O'Connell, they brought that same mindset to retirement. It's funny, they were kind of the two lads that didn't need to maybe plan for retirement. They were always kind of going to be the 4 or 5 that are going to be looked after their playing career. Can you understand, or do you see the mistakes that other players make approaching and beginning retirement from sport?
100%. It's very frustrating because they've never had more help there. There's never been more evidence or talk around how difficult it can be for some people. And I really feel for them because it is such a privilege to do what you love as your career. And the buzz of training, the buzz of playing in big stadiums, winning silverware, losing silverware, is hard to replicate. As I said, that the fact is, like Paul O'Connell and Brian Driscoll, who were my vintage, they already had massive careers, massive profiles, but they were incredibly meticulous in terms of the planning for next step. And the reason I brought that story up or the reason I've told that before was because it's ironic. It's the journeymen like me who really need to focus on networking, study, work experience, having mentorship, having mentors who will help you, and often they kind of push it down the road, think it'll never happen to me, or I'll worry about it then, and then they get into a bit of a cycle of frustration and fear and anxiety, which are horrific. But I said, thankfully there's a big investment. So Rugby Players Ireland, or the players' body, they all have employees in each province who are there to help players, not just near the end, but all the way through their career in terms of trying to work out what the next step is, which is brilliant. And it's not. I've worked in Wales. It's not anywhere near as strong over there. And ironically, the economy over there is tougher, so they actually would need more. France, to be fair, are very, very strong. The players' union in France are very strong, and there's a lot of opportunities for players to get further education, etc. While playing. But I think it's difficult. I think my mindset would have been, so my dad's a cattle leader, and you have good days, bad days. You bring cattle to the mart, you don't get the price you want. But I suppose you can't feel sorry for yourself. You got to go and go again. And I think that helped me as well because, as I said, I didn't want to look back. I broke all ties with Leinster. I didn't go around watch training. I didn't go to games as a supporter. I either went as an employee, so I was either working for media or I wasn't going there. And it's funny, I never lost love of the game. I love the game. Actually, I love the game even more now. But it was important for me to find out what areas were going to help me still love the game, if that makes sense. So I went back coaching. Obviously, I went to France to coach professionally, but I was coaching like junior clubs while I was playing. And I just love the buzz of the dressing room. I love the buzz of a clubhouse if the team have done well for that half hour where everybody's happy and just gives people a bit of a lift. And I just realised that was going to be the way I was going to stay involved long term. And obviously now I'm out of pro rugby since 2017, so it's 9 years, and I'm still very much involved, if that makes sense.
I'm careful when I ask this question, but it's come up a couple of times and you've kind of referenced it there a little bit. Bernard, is elite sport healthy?
I'd say there's areas that aren't. Definitely, there's areas that aren't. Yes, in my experiences of it were I wouldn't change it for the world, if that makes sense. And that's only because it hasn't affected me post my career. But certainly, it's a ruthless elite environment where, yeah, if you could create that environment in a non-sporting elite world, you wouldn't last long, or you wouldn't have many friends or followers, you know. But and that's the pressure of it, you know. And there's some people get it really right and manage to get elite levels of performance without any negativity or over emphasize the pressure point of it, and then others maybe step over the line. But a lot of it's down to I wouldn't say the bad behaviours are deliberate, if that makes sense. It's literally just failure to do the right thing at the right time, and that can create an environment that's very tough. But as I said, it's something that when you're in it, you want to be part of it, and certainly I wouldn't change my career for the world. And I was far from all highs, but it's all part of your journey and how it can hopefully help you grow.
Did you feel more pressure as a coach or a player during your career?
Way more so as a coach, and still, I got involved with a club at Malahide for the last 7 or 8 weeks of the season. No, actually 8 weeks of the season, and they were in a relegation battle, and I wasn't able to go to all the matches. A brilliant guy called Colin Boomer was coaching them, but on the last day they played a playoff game against a club called Boyne, and it was a relegation promotion playoff. So if we had lost, we got relegated, and it was a big relegation. It's to go from being a senior club to a junior club, and the route back is incredibly tough. And we were losing with 3 minutes to go, and it's not going to affect wasn't going to affect my livelihood, and yet I had this unbelievable pressure, because there's a pressure of expectation, there's the pressure of feeling you want the group that you've got to know and like to not have that failure, and thankfully we won with a try in the 78th minute, and then there's the relief. But so I would say, well, as a player, the pressure's in the dressing room, the pressure's walking out of the tunnel. But then you're in the game. You know what I mean? You're in the game, so you actually can control it to a certain extent. Whereas, and I'm not saying coaches can't control it, but you have less control than actually being in the game.
Yeah. What do you wish you knew as a player with all the insights you have now as a coach and also as a pundit?
Find areas that you can add value and do those, you know, and don't worry about, just really focus on your strengths. Like for me as a pundit, I don't have the profile, or hadn't the profile of a lot of lads who had 100 caps or whatever. But how can I add value? Well, I can add value by tapping into my coaching experience, tapping into my experience of having coached outside of Ireland, having coached in France, having a great network of coaches who are my friends, who can make sure that I'm stay current. Because the longer it is since you played or you're in that dressing room, the harder it is to stay current, because the game is changing all the time. So, and then to try and basically tell a story to the listener, tell a story to the viewer, where they feel that they're more educated or more informed than they were before you spoke. And you can't do that. Everything can't be a nugget. But it's trying to be so up to date or informed that when an opportunity comes to add value, you can. Whereas I suppose when I was playing, maybe, and I was captain of Connacht, and I captained Ireland A, and I captained Leinster a couple of times, is nearly worrying too much about everybody else's jobs and not kind of going, well, look, this is what I'm going to do, and when the pressure comes on, I'm going to just double down on that, and I'm going to bring that to my maximum effort, and that will help the team. You know, I didn't really figure that out till very late in my career, and also I would say I kind of ignored weaknesses. So I was a poor line-out thrower. It was an area I really struggled with, and it was a core function of my game. And it was the only area of rugby that I actually had any real stress about. I found, and I'm far from the best, but actually when the game started, I was really comfortable. I never really got stressed about anything except the line out. But unfortunately, that was a core part of mine. It was only really at the end of my career when I started working with a guy called Enda McNulty, and I started to change how I trained that part of the game, how I visualized, how I had a process to it, how I got my heart rate down, that it became something that I wasn't as anxious about. And then suddenly everything is just flowing much better, you know. So I would love to have learned that as a 18, 19-year-old. I would have saved myself about 10 years of unnecessary stress, and I would have played a lot more as well. I would have been, yeah. So I did the stag me last night. I got 9 caps for Ireland, and the guy introduced me, said Bernard Jackman, 9 caps for Ireland. He was rested for the other 91 matches, you know, and I'd love to think I was, but I certainly would have liked to hope that if I had been better in that area, I might have been in the mix more for more opportunities.
Yeah. What, out of interest, what techniques did Enda teach you? Like even the piece around slowing your heart rate in the game?
Yeah, so it was just a case of really a really strict process. So I would say it's like a golfer going up to the tee box. If you watch them, they all have a routine. It's like a tennis player with a serve. They all have a routine. I've never really broken that down. You know what I mean? So we broke it down to 8 steps, which the first one is get the ball. You know, but like when we made that part of every throw I ever threw at training, whether it was one-on-one with him or one-on-one with another hooker, or whether it was in a small group and just working on the lift and catch and throw, or whether it was our line-out sessions, it just became every time I threw the ball, the 8th part was the ball leaving my hands, you know, and sorry, the 8th part was the follow through after, and the finishing position of your hands, and that over time helps your heart rate come down. Obviously, one of those steps was a breath, you know. One of the steps was the visualization, and then I suppose I would have done a lot of work around visualizing the line-out menu that we had for that weekend, visualizing the ball leaving my hand, visualizing the spiral of the ball, visualizing the flight of the ball, visualizing the ball going into the catcher's hands, you know, and reinforcing those successes rather than the failures, and then just little tricks around trying to, if you haven't had a bad throw, or if a throw was actually good, but the opposition read it really well, and it wasn't actually my fault, of not going to the next one and thinking about that again. So like leaving it behind you, you know. So things like that, just, it's not rocket science, but when you're not doing it, and you start doing it, it becomes really beneficial.
Yeah. Do you have any big regrets from your career?
Yeah, 100%. I think I should have found expertise quicker around that area. You know, I never met it head on. I ignored it. And yeah, I wish it was. And actually, you know what? It wasn't even my idea. Enda McNulty used to train in the gym that we used in Leinster. David Lloyd. It was a public-private gym, so member gym, and we were down the back. And he bumped into Michael Cheika, and he pitched to Michael Cheika that he's there to get involved. And Cheika came to me and asked me, "Would you meet this bloke, or whatever?" And I met him, and he admitted, he said, "Look, I don't know anything about line of throwing, but I'm there to help you." And we just got going, and then he started doing some work with the team. And yeah, I regret not getting expertise in that area earlier in my career. Would have saved me a lot of stress.
So were you the guinea pig then for Enda?
Yeah, I was a guinea pig, and then he started working. Yeah, I was, because I went back to Cheika and said, "Look, I want to keep working with him," and I think that gave Cheika a little bit of comfort that, you know, as a rugby player. So he was an Australian, so he might never appreciated Gaelic games. He might have thought, "Oh, who's this amateur, you know, athlete who's going to come in and talk to, you know, the Bernard Jackman of this world and stuff." So maybe, yeah, Enda was very well educated in his own way and all stuff, but I was certainly a window or a link in, and yeah, we ended up winning Magnus League in 2008 and Champions Cup or Heineken Cup in 2009. So then Enda went on to work with Ireland and was part of some great success there. So yeah, he's an expert in his own right, and added value. But I was probably the link in.
Okay, so he is you to thank then, Enda.
Yeah, he does.
Give us an insight into those days playing for Leinster. Like you mentioned, Cheika there as coach. You mentioned his approach. Just what I loved about was his standards and the consistency and what he brought to the team, and he just didn't let you settle at all.
Yeah. So I think he can be the right guy at the wrong time, or the right woman with the wrong team, and I think Michael Cheika was exactly what Leinster needed in 2005 when he got the job, and he got the job out of nowhere. He wasn't the marquee manager. He was a young manager, had a decent playing career without being an international or anything like that. Then he went coaching quite young in Italy, and Mick Dawson, the Leinster CEO, took a chance on him, and he had this passion and drive from his family were Lebanese origin, grew up in Sydney, probably had it tough enough. He had it tough enough, and he had this fight in him. He had this fight in him, and chip on his shoulder, backs to the wall, and wanted us to buy into that and actually be a little bit harder on ourselves and have a little bit more of a chip on our shoulder and want to do something that we hadn't done before, because we were an unbelievably talented group. Like I played in Sale, I played in Connacht, and like you know from the first training session that there's way more tools here than I had previously, and the squad is much deeper, etc. But unfortunately, when it came to the crunch, Orla, we kept letting ourselves down, and we would coast for most of the season because we were more talented, and we'd play some brilliant rugby, but we were missing the core part, which is around togetherness and identity, hard edge, fight, good culture, putting Leinster first. They were all missing, really. They weren't missing every day, but when you come up against a team who had a similar level of talent and the other stuff, we fell flat in our face. And he didn't. He could see this every day, and he pushed us and pushed us and pushed us, and he refused to back off, even when he was under pressure for his own job. And sometimes I've seen this with managers, is instead of when they're under pressure to ease off a little bit for fear of player unrest or maybe losing their job. He just kept being Michael Cheika, kept pushing us, kept telling us when we were good, and kept telling us more importantly when we weren't good. And eventually he got people out of the business, out of the team that he felt couldn't stick the pace, brought in people who could, and it turned and really properly in 2009, but you could see the seeds of it in 2008. And I would have said, even though it was a shock when we won in 2009 to everybody externally, I think we all felt we'd actually made significant change, and we were ready to go. And I think that was the start. And then Joe Schmidt came in after him, and I wasn't there for Joe, but certainly he brought a different strength to it, which is his strength, which is technical, tactical, detail. And then, then a lot of those players when I went to Ireland, with Andy Farr, and that's more holistic, more around sorry, it is very detailed as well, but his probably thing is more around the culture and the identity and the togetherness piece. So it just depends on what group you have, what a coach's strength. Which coaches' strengths are really important, are the best fit for that. But like, I think Michael Cheika has softened, and now he's working in rugby league, and he's had an unbelievable career since. But I from what I hear, Michael Cheika is still Michael Cheika. It's the standards that he wants and believes are right. He chases them all the time, and I think that's really important. And what a coach is authentic. It's funny. I met Ronan O'Gara 3 weeks ago. I went up to Belfast, and he's the same age as me, and we played together. He's an unbelievable man, and he was just telling me that he said, "Oh, do you know what my nickname is with the group?" And I said, "No." And he said, he's been in La Rochelle 6 or 7 years. He said his nickname is "Ça va la famille," which is basically "How's the family?" Because apparently, if someone's going to get dropped, Raj always says to them, "Ça va la famille," first, and then next thing they know, they'll drop them, because he's there so long, and they've obviously all chatted. the players notice that that's a tell for him, right? And we were laughing away about it, but I actually think it's actually, if I was in that group, I would admire that more because he's consistent, if that makes sense. So the thing that I always found with leadership or coaches was as long as they were consistent in what they wanted, tactically, technically, culture-wise, you either get on board with that or you move on, right? And everybody has more confidence in the system because there's that clarity. The challenge I always found was when the coach or leader for 3 weeks or 4 weeks said this is a fundamental for us, this is non-negotiable, and then you chase that, and then suddenly you see people not chasing it or rebelling against it, and it's not being challenged, okay? Or suddenly then something else, it's the new trend, or the new piece of kit or whatever, and then you get confused a little bit. So Joe Schmidt called them the rocks. What are the rocks of our performance? What are the things we hang our hat on? And 3 or 4 of them, and it'd be consistent in them. And you can always fine tune them, but I think they're the leaders that and Raj, just that example is that consistency of how he deals with people who are being left out. I actually think it's a strength rather than a weakness.
Yeah. When you mentioned the house, the family, the Andy Farrow holistic approach versus checking, I know you said you've softened now. Does that hard edge approach, is that still effective now, or have players evolved?
I think you probably have to connect with them first. I think there has to be a period where they get to know you, and you get to know them, and the trust evolves. I think once the trust is there, absolutely you can push. You can push really hard. I think whereas before first day of the season, first day of pre-season, those coaches could just come in and just like basically say, right, it's going to be like this. I think now what I've seen is you need to bring the playing group with you. You need to involve them in the discussion. It's not saying you can't sell it. Like when I went away, I spent some time down in New Zealand, and I met a guy called Wayne Smith, his nickname is the Professor in New Zealand. He's one of the best coaches they've ever had, best all-back coaches they've ever had. And I asked him for advice around, what would he say to a young coach? Because I was a young coach at the time, and he said, I'd say this to a young coach, I'd say this to my daughter, my son, a student, an auctioneer, a teacher. The 2 best skills he thinks you can have are to be able to public speak and to sell. And he said, not public speak and get up in front of 1,000 people. That's very hard. A lot of people wouldn't want to do that or won't ever get the opportunity to do that. But to be able to stand up or sit down with a group of people and be able to speak well enough to communicate your message, and then to sell it, right? And to sell it, it's a combination of incorporating the ideas from the group and matching that to your vision of what's important, if that makes sense, and to get them to understand that if we do this, we will have success together and great times together. And even yesterday, speaking with those Lions coaches, the rugby coaches who were over to play Leinster and Munster, and they were talking about the challenge for them of every Monday morning. And they've had some really tough times. So they're having a good season this year, but they've been in the bottom half of the league for the last 2 or 3 years. But their job every Monday morning is to go into their team, whether it's the backs or the forwards or the collective, review what had happened on Saturday, and sometimes it's not positive because they've been losing, but sell to them the progress they're making, the little wins they're having, and that over time it's going to turn. So that's the thing I would say is the modern manager or leader. You can still have that drive, that passion. Absolutely, you have to be authentic to yourself, but probably now there's a process of creating trust, creating relationships, understanding before it'll really become accepted to the same extent it would have 15 years ago.
Yeah. You brought up something, you've kind of half answered the question, but when you mentioned earlier about being being in a winning dressing room and environment versus being in an environment that's trying to survive and avoid relegation, what's the tangible difference between the two? Is it that selling piece we're progressing still?
Tangible difference is you don't get the reassurance that the others get from winning, and it's way harder. It's way harder. You're constantly trying to manage. You can push a winning team harder. I think that's the reality of it, because they're getting the feel good factor from winning. They're getting the reassurance, the confidence boost, the self belief, the ego from the actual results. Right? So they come in the Monday morning feeling great about themselves. The challenge of managing a team who are down the bottom of the table is understanding how you have to tailor your message, and your communication style to get the message across, because that's and to get the growth, but to understand that maybe their ego, their self belief is on a low ebb, the confidence in each other, the anxiety they maybe have about the effect relegation would have on their contract and their future, and the family pressures and all that stuff. You have to try and manage that as well, and also you also have to understand that, if you're in a top four team and you're in a bottom four team, often the difference between both sets of players is that belief part. Like I think Connacht, for example, when I was in Connacht, we used to all do fitness testing together with the four provinces, for the RFU, and we used to blow the house down. Our scores were way better than Munster's at the time, right? Yes, Munster were winning European Cups or challenging European Cups, and we were struggling. So it's not always the physical side of it. Yeah, for sure. Often the best athletes are in the best clubs, but it's the whole grit, resilience. Like Munster had that in spades. They had the identity. They had this brotherhood. They had this success at club level, and all that fed into guys, a group of men who, from a physical point of view, were actually inferior to us according to the tests. But yet, they were much better than us in terms of winning rugby matches, which is what their job was. But sorry, my point is that as a leader, you need to understand where the morale levels are at. Okay, and again, it's that constant balance. So the French have so when I was coaching in France, my president, which is basically the CEO, I used to have to go to him every Monday morning for a chat. And every single Monday morning, he's like, "Ça va," which is "how are you?" And he'd say, "Ça va, Bernard." He said, "Le mayonnaise est bien pris ou pas?" Okay, right, which is a really old-fashioned French saying. And basically, "le mayonnaise est bien pris ou pas" means the mayonnaise is well set or not. Okay, well taken, well made. And basically, the analogy there is that, so the French love their food, and each region has their own specialities. So Grenoble is in the mountains, a lot of mountain food, a lot of potatoes, cheeses, heavy kind of stodgy food that makes you warm, right? And then obviously you've got your Stade Toulouse sausages, you've got your Basque Country, and they all have different delicacies. And the French chefs are very proud of their output, the food they make. And apparently in France, any chef with any self-respect wouldn't buy Hellmann's or Heinz mayonnaise. Okay, they make their own. Okay. So and again, I don't really understand this, but because I would have thought the ingredients were quite simple, but at different times of the year, different ingredients are in season, out of season, etc. Or you have access to different quality of ingredients. But the reality is the customer doesn't care. All he cares about is does it taste good? Is it a nice compliment to the food they're having? And what they have to do is every time they make mayonnaise, they have to assess the ingredients and then adapt the process to make good mayonnaise. Okay. And what he was saying to me is how are the ingredients? So basically, how's the injuries? Okay. How's the morale? How's the contract situation affecting certain players? Because there could be in negotiations, there could be getting distracted by a bigger club or a bigger deal, or maybe going to think to retire. And then basically, what am I going to do as the head coach to try and make sure on Saturday we create good mayonnaise. Okay, and again, it's an analogy that I like in terms of every Monday morning you go into work, or every Tuesday morning, or Wednesday morning, or Thursday morning, or if you're a GA coach or a basketball coach and you're coaching Tuesday night, Thursday night, whatever. Like when you go into that dressing room, into that sports hall, you kind of need to assess, well, how are my ingredients? You know, how are they? And they're going to be different every single week. There's going to be someone in a different place. They're going to be affected by the result of the previous weekend. They're going to be affected by the opposition they're going to play and how they see them. And then your job is to kind of prepare them in the best possible way with the information you have, but still have them going north. That makes sense? Yeah. And maybe go northeast, northwest, but don't be going east one week, west the following week, southeast the week after. Like that, I don't agree with that either. And maybe I'm too set in my ways, and maybe I need to be more creative and to be chopping and changing all the time to find different things. But I think, as I said, in my experience, the best leaders have kind of understood that they understand this works. I may have to manipulate it slightly and try different things to get everybody going the same way or towards that direction, that North Star. But also understanding that you're going to have to change your message or your approach depending on how the people are.
Yeah, that reminds me, you've spoken a lot about kind of the cultural exchanges you've done around the world, but I want to hone in a little bit on Sir Alex Ferguson. Like what struck out to me about how you spoke about him was when they were at the pinnacle of football, he still had them in the mentality of they were chasing someone else. How did he do that?
He said that he tapped into the working class mentality. You know, he said he was a working class background. His father worked in the docks in Govan in Glasgow. A lot of the players' family backgrounds would have been that. So he was always trying to tell stories around working class people working really hard to achieve something, and not to understand that staying at the top is even harder than getting there. And it was funny, like he brought in the Chilean. Do you remember the Chilean mining
yes.
story where, you know, and like he used that as an example of resilience, teamwork, and then a couple of months later, the players walk into the dressing room for a match, and there's two Chilean miners in the dressing room. You know, he was always like, he would find something from real life, I think, and sell that to the players and make them see the type of values, behaviours they need using a different angle to keep it fresh. He also, like, he was never tactical or technical. Sorry, he always outsourced the technical piece to his coaches, and he just chased the three values. And he chased these for 25 years, I think, which is around be brave and never give up and team first. And again, I admire that simplicity. You know, and if I'm part of that, if I'm Roy Keane, if I'm Paul McGrath, if I'm Ruud van Nistelrooy, and I know that he is going to judge me on those. Well, then if I just deliver those, and I'm constantly working on my technical and tactical understanding, because that's important too, and my physical conditioning, I'm going to give myself the best possible chance of being in the team. And if I don't, I'm going to risk the wrath of him. It was funny, I was at the Roy Keane thing on Roy Keane did the show on Friday night there in the Tree Arena, and like, you know, he has no time for Ferguson now, or very little time for him, whatever, right? But like, I think at some stage, or maybe he would admit it now privately, like, I'd like to hope that he also sees, I'd like to think he'll also see that Ferguson's ways gave Roy the opportunity to be part of a successful team as well. And sometimes that's the hard part, is that, as you know, the players maybe don't understand the message. Like when I retired, to be honest, so the reason I said that about Keane and Ferguson is, when I retired, I finished with having a row with Checo, okay, about my own career and my own. Basically, I felt like I was suffering a lot of concussions, and I wanted to stop on two games to go, and he kind of wanted me to play, and we had a bit of a bust up, etc. And I probably for a year I was bitter with him and angry with him, right? But then when I softened up a little bit and I really looked at my 5 years in Leinster, I realised that Michael Cheika, he was like that with everybody. His job was to try and get us to get the absolute maximum out of ourselves, physically, mentally. And if he hadn't been like that, or if he had given me a soft option, if he had done that for the previous 5 years, I wouldn't have had the successes or the experience I had. Does that make sense? So,
Yeah.
So it can't all be, champagne and roses, but it's having someone at the top, driving things on, and obviously in a safe place and all that stuff. There's a limit to it, but I was able to look back and say, well, yeah, I didn't like how he did that, or I didn't like how this coach did that, but like they were doing everything in their power to create the environment for us to be successful.
Yeah. What's the biggest misconception about elite performance or elite teams?
Talent is enough. It's not. There's a certain level of talent in all elite teams, and you can never count your chickens. It's on the day. I think we saw a couple of weeks in GA down shocking Donegal. It happens every week in sport. It happens every week in sport. When one team is ready to go to the absolute wire, and another team maybe aren't ready, whether that's physically, tactically, psychologically, and they get found out. So talent, you have to be talented. And you have to. The more in my game now, rugby, there's a serious premium on athleticism. So the early days of professional rugby, just being a really good footballer, having a really good game understanding, made you be able to compete with better athletes. I think now it's nearly impossible. If you can't be second row 6'1" at international level, it's just you can't be a tight end prop if you're not incredibly strong in the gym and out of the gym, no matter how mentally tough you are. So there's that premium on athleticism, and that's probably I put talent and athleticism kind of in the same bracket. For sure, you need a certain amount of that, but at the end of the day, all those teams have a certain amount of that, and it's the non-athletic stuff, it's the non-talent stuff that affects your ability to be successful or to stay in it.
Mm. When you look across the sport and performance, and you remove whatever arena you're in, is it rugby, is it golf, is it Gaelic football, whatever business, is it the same challenges and questions that people have across their own disciplines, that it's actually we all just have the same pursuit and the same questions and the same barriers to reaching our potential?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so, Orla. I think there's so much ability in everybody. There's so much potential in every team. It's the communication of where we're at. It's the understanding and communication of where we want to go. It's the plan to get there. So probably the simplest way I've heard of analysing performances, and this is corporate or sporting or arts or education, is performance is your capabilities multiplied by your behaviours. Okay, and high performance is being really consistent in that equation, right? So if you're a high performer or a performer, you need to understand what your capabilities are today, okay, individually. So if it's an individual thing, it's a technical, tactical, physical, mental maximum you can bring, right? So where are the gaps, right? What's your plan to improve those? Likewise in a team, if you're a very young, inexperienced team and you're the leader, can you bring experience into that, right? Or how can you expose those athletes to more situations where they're going to get experience quicker? Okay. And likewise, if you're an old team that maybe gone tired, team lacking energy, how can you bring more youth and exuberance into that team? And then the behaviors are, well, what are the behaviors that are going to maximize those capabilities? And so from a capabilities point of view, in business, for example, HR being aligned to. I work with a lot of sales teams, and you speak to the sales leader, and they say we're missing that IP. We're missing that IP. We're missing that training. We're missing that software. We're missing whatever they're missing. And to be able to communicate that, to find the resource, to give it to them, and then get your behaviors right in terms of application, work rate, trust, respect, recognizing success, being a team player. And both of those together then will give you performance. And then if you're really consistent, it gives you high performance. So that's transferable across everything, I think, is to break it down. And likewise, as a coach of a camogie team or a cricket team, look at the capabilities of your team. Look at the capabilities of your support staff. And are you actively, I'm not saying change everybody, but what are you doing to mentor somebody, to give them access to further education? Whatever it is, training sessions that you're doing, are they improving the capabilities of the team, or are they just training for the sake of training? So I find that a very good way of focusing on what's important.
I heard a line recently enough. I can't remember if the line was "an idiot can make anyone tired" or "somebody can make anyone tired." But one of the things that struck me about your career as well was you were at the screen to the side here. You were head of high performance sport at Horse Sport Ireland for a while. Just going into the cauldron of an Olympic sport in a very different arena. What was that experience like?
No, it was amazing. So I wasn't looking for the job. The job kind of came across my desk. Funny enough, from an interview I did in RT on a business show, and a couple of people heard it and thought I was worth an interview or a call about it. And it was such a brilliant experience because it was a very short term opportunity. So it was 13 months out from the Paris Olympics, an opportunity to go in as head of high performance for our our three Olympic sports and our Paralympic sport, para dressage, and to go to Paris and head that up. And effectively, the thing is I was never, my role or anyone in that role. You could be an equestrian expert, that's different. But realistically, even though an equestrian expert would have a very good understanding of, the disciplines, at the end of the day, those disciplines are all very unique in their own way. It would be like, I'm not saying Michael Dwyer, for example, like if he was in charge of Kilkenny hurling, or I don't know, Limerick camogie, like I would imagine he would have an understanding of it, but he would empower coaches who are experts in that field to deliver a lot of the main stuff. So effectively, dressage and para dressage, and eventing and show jumping are all very different, except they're all equestrian, if that makes sense, and they're all a rider on a horse. So my job was to facilitate and empower and help what we call the chef de keep. So basically, that's the leader of each sport, or the high performance director, is the Sport Ireland term and the OFI term. But realistically, in the industry, it's known as the chef de keep. And they were all, so we have 4 different chefs de keeps. They were all experts in their own field. They all had their own unique ways of managing, the ways of selecting, the ways of communicating. They all had their things that they like doing and not like doing, that unfortunately are part of the job. I would say they all had their own super strengths. They all had little gaps that maybe because they didn't like or hadn't experienced in or hadn't been to Olympics before, just a little bit unsure about. And my job is to try and, I suppose, alleviate those stresses, help them focus on their strengths, make sure that our athletes are getting the best possible planning, logistically, and communication, aware of the milestones they need to hit, and just bring it all together to work with Sport Ireland and the Olympic Federation of Ireland, who I found amazing as two stakeholders. Work HSI, obviously, is the governing body. So to kind of be that glue in between to make sure that they had the best possible chance of going to Paris and having a positive experience. And it was amazing. We didn't medal, unfortunately, and there's always going to be regrets when you don't. But I'd like to hope, and from certainly feedback in the Olympic review that we had, was the athletes felt they went there with the best possible chance. And after that, there's an element of luck and around, there's an element of luck and also misfortune or poor execution of the plan, which we all know happens. So yeah, it was absolutely fascinating. I'm still involved. I stepped away from that role. And my dad got ill, and I stepped away from that role because it was 100 days a year contract, to be honest, and I needed those days back. But I stayed on as chair of the high performance advisory group committee. So I'm still for show jumping uniquely, and so I'm still very much involved. I'm still very passionate about it, and I'm excited. I'm excited about the journey towards LA. But for them, it's a funny one in that, you know, it's probably the Olympics are absolutely massive for every sport. They're massive for the equestrian, but there's still significant tournaments and competitions going on. So badminton is on this weekend. There'll be over 100,000 people there for the eventing. You know, our show jumpers are going to Athens soon for a qualification for the Olympics and a World Championship. And you know, every weekend it's like the PGA golf. Every weekend somewhere in the world, there's equestrian athletes representing themselves or their country and trying to create success.
How do you, when you said you alleviate stresses for the athletes going into the Olympic Games, how do you do that when you've never competed at the Olympic Games?
Yeah, I think absolutely. But I have competed in the bull ring. You know, I've been in an environment with 82,000 people, 84,000 people, pressure, TV, and a small window to perform. So obviously 80 minutes is longer than, well, yeah, eventing is a little bit longer, but yeah, a little bit longer. But I've been in those situations either as a player or coach, so I know I can empathize with them. I can understand that maybe moods and behaviors and anxiety will affect their kind of their personalities and characters, but it's all part of them getting into place they need to be to perform. Yeah, and to be honest, like for me, it was. I'd like to hope that a lot of the work I did, they didn't even know I did it. You know what I mean? Because it was channeled through their chef de keep, who is their point of contact. You know, so the less I had to speak to the athletes towards the end, the better, because it meant that they were locked and loaded.
Yeah. What did you learn from being in like the environment of the Olympics, you know, and what that is?
It just reinforced to me something that I knew going into it, was that elite behaviors are very similar in business and sport and within sport. So, you know, hurling, GA, soccer, Olympic sports, rugby, effectively, there's a certain level of self-drive, mental strength, dedication, passion that are just common, and business as well. Like I did a session a couple of weeks ago with a group of business people, and they were probably as elite as any sporting team I ever visited. You know, and the only thing is they didn't realise it because they're not going into an auditorium and performing, but what they do every day and how they hold each other to account, how they design a plan, how they measure themselves, how they give feedback was elite. So yeah, I think elite people have a lot of similar personalities, but just their passion is going down a different direction.
Yeah, you've led me to my favourite question: what separates the best from the rest?
Passion, I would say, at the core, because I think passion gives you the chance to be resilient. I've seen very few elite people who aren't absolute masters of their trade, aren't in some ways maybe obsessed about it, love it, get energy from it, want to be even better at it. Yeah, passion for me, you can't match that. Passion will steer you to do all the other things you need to do to become elite. Passion is the one.
Yeah. Speaking of the best of the rest, we actually were in the same room there last year for an event Brian O'Driscoll spoke at. You were fortunate to be a teammate of his. I'm fascinated by Brian. I just think he's just an absolute amazing person. Got a chance to ask him a question as well. Give us a Brian O'Driscoll story that we haven't heard yet.
I was so lucky to play with him, be captain by him, with Ireland, with Leinster. I got to know him as he was breaking through, and he scored his 3 tries. He has a connection to Clontarf, who I'm playing for. I would say the story that probably I might have said it before, but I'll say it again, is when Brian was captain of Leinster. It was under Michael Cheika, and Cheika was very hard with us on a Monday morning. And Brian always said, we will win F all until players can hold me to account like I hold you to account. So Brian would let you know if you were off. You know what I mean? And that's absolutely right. But it was very hard for people to pull him up, because he very rarely did anything wrong. Like, he was always the best, and he always trained hard, and he was always on it. But I remember one day Johnny Sexton was brought up to train with us, and he wasn't even supposed to be training. I think someone got injured. He was in the academy, and we were doing an attacking drill, and Brian gave him a pass that wasn't as good as it needed to be, and Johnny let him have it, and we were all like, wow. You know, we've heard him say for 3 years, you know, hold me to account like I hold you to account. But this is a nobody. You know, we hardly knew Johnny at the time, and I don't think you would have expected it from him. And in fairness to him, rather than actually say shut up, you little prick, or whatever, which he could have said, he actually said, you're right, yeah. But it's one thing saying you're right, but then we saw over the next while, every training session, Brian out. It was a left-handed pass. Brian out, literally working really hard on an area of a skill that he was already very good at, but just on that occasion he hadn't executed. And I think that was a small thing, but it was a little moment on the journey of us actually kind of understanding the little changes we all needed to make to get where we wanted to get to.
Yeah. What allowed Johnny to be at the level he was at for so long?
His passion. Like, Johnny absolutely loves rugby. Even when he was out of the game there for a little while, he has a kind of a library home office with a TV in it, and I think he spent more time watching matches in there when he was retired and out of rugby than he did when he was playing. He absolutely loves it. He's fascinated by the game, and he's a competitor. Like, he's very good at golf. He's very good at paddle. He wants to win those games. You know, he wants to win everything. But I think that comes from the passion he has for. He has a passion for rugby, but I think he has a passion for competing. I think that's probably the one that stands out to me about Johnny.
Could you compare and contrast? Maybe it's a bit unfair I'm asking that, but compare and contrast Brian O'Driscoll and Johnny as leaders.
Yeah, you can. I think Johnny was probably less. Johnny's probably more, or is more emotionally vulnerable. You know, like there was times when Johnny would, you know, you'd hear a crack in his voice. You know, Johnny was probably more comfortable speaking from the heart, if that makes sense. Brian, it's a small little difference, but I always would have felt that sometimes Johnny maybe wasn't able to elaborate on what he wanted to say because he was so emotional, and that was really powerful. But then Brian was also, it was clear he was very passionate, he wanted to win, but he was able to communicate that in a a deeper manner with more detail. But yet both methods worked really well, if that makes sense. You know, but I'd say that's the biggest difference with him. I think Johnny would probably be more emotionally irrational sometimes too, right? But because we all knew and trusted him, we didn't judge him for that. You know, we admired him that he was trying to bring us the right place and wanted to follow. And same with Brian, but in a different way.
Mm. Well, I loved your insights from your masters. It sounds like the type of masters I would love to do. You just fly around the world, go into elite places, sports and business and everything in between. What was the most impressive place that you went to that maybe we wouldn't have maybe thought of as an elite environment?
So I went to the IMG Tennis Academy in Florida, right? And I went there because we used an analogy. So we beat Munster in 2009 in the semi-final of the European Cup. Going into the match, at 2:30, we were chokers. We were weak mentally. We didn't respect the jersey. And at 4:00, we were the greatest things in the sliced pan, right? Like, it's just because we won the match, right?
Yeah.
And we had 3 weeks to go before we played Leicester Tigers in the final in Murrayfield. And to be fair, even though we hated Munster and we begrudged them the success they were having, and we knew we had to topple them to have the success we wanted to have, there was no guarantee we'd ever run into each other in the Champions Cup, right? So we could have won the Champions Cup without beating Munster, right? Because they could have got beaten by somebody else. That was unlikely, but could have happened. So when we talked about the team we wanted to be and the legacy we wanted to create, we spoke about being the first ever Leinster team to win a European Cup, right? To make it easier for the next ones, right? Okay. And Michael Cheika and Enda McNulty wanted to get us back focused on that, right? Because, as I said, the media, the speculation, the hype became totally different. And instead of being the underdogs, we were suddenly the favourites, because whoever beat Munster surely win the European Cup. But as I said, we hadn't talked about beating Munster. We talked about being the first Leinster team to win the European Cup. So Enda McNulty told us a story about the IMG Tennis Academy in Florida. So the IMG Tennis Academy in Florida is a mecca for high-performing tennis in particular, right? So I think over 70% of the top 100 players in the world have spent time there, male and female.
I think the Williams sisters would have went there, but it wasn't named that.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable facility. And it's someone's down a talent ID. So like, they find the best 8-year-olds in Eastern Europe or in Asia, and they bring them to Florida. So it's not just the training, but it is a very impressive place. And because typical American sport, bigger, build. And suddenly they had too many hotel rooms, too many conference suites for tennis, even though that's the primary place. So they started this to rent out team building breaks, athletic development breaks to NBA and NFL, elite sports teams across the world who would go to Florida for warm weather training, play golf, and prepare for a big event or have a bit of downtime. And also they started to invite in corporate teams to do team building, away days, where they could do some strategy stuff, but also tap into some of the fitness facilities, some of the expertise they have around psychology, mental strength, visualization, all those different things, because they've got everything you need there. So they do a little test. So basically, they get a group into the room and they say, look, our mission for the next half hour or hour is there's a white fence a kilometre down away from the facility. Your mission as a team is you got to touch the white fence. Do you accept the mission? Right? And most people say, yeah, we will. And they get, whether they're corporate or MBA or military teams, they say, yeah, let's go. Right? So everyone gets up. And just before you leave, they say, actually, be careful, he said, because they put up a route on the PowerPoint. And they say, just there where the trees are, there's a bit of a creek. And this time of year, wild boar come into the creek. And they bite people. Right? So just be careful, right? So they have cameras all the way along the route. And you see them all heading off, these 6'8" basketballers, bang, bang. And next thing, they get to the woods and they hear this noise coming from the trees, which they perceive to be wild boar, and they turn back, right? They come back, right? So, but the military teams, the Marines and the SAS, etc., when they hear the noise, they crouch down, they look into the forest, and they see it's speakers, okay? It's a recording, and they go and touch the white fence, right? So the analogy is, if your mission is to touch the white fence, right, to get there, especially if it's elite or hard, there's going to be loads of wild boars, okay? There's going to be loads of things that can distract you. And we actually, we flipped it. So we, instead of talking about all the distractions, we'd start talking about touch the white fence, which for us was to win the European Cup. And I went there, I used that in 2009. Sorry, I've been part of a team that used that little analogy just to get us to focus for 3 weeks to achieve our mission. And I went there in 2010 on my way back from New Zealand and saw it firsthand. And again, I'm a bit simple. I like stories, analogies to help me focus or to help me understand what I need to do. And I thought that's still going. They're still using it as a little workshop training aid to help people understand what's stopping them actually achieving their mission. And that's a little one that I don't always tell, but I think it's a nice way of understanding, that there are certain things we can that do affect us, and we have to deal with those. but there's other things that are just distractions. Maybe your mobile phone, maybe it's, you're not getting to bed on time, whatever it is, that can take us away from our primary mission.
Oh, I enjoyed that story. I've heard you say it before. I've heard lots of different anecdotes. I think one company did standing meetings to kind of keep things on the road. I love that. Since COVID, things have changed. Are we now reversing back to pre-COVID? Have we just kind of blocked it out of our minds what has happened, and we're now reversing back from work from home into the office from in the business world? Am I right in that analysis, or is it still different?
There's a big push. Yeah, there's a big push to get back. I think it'll never go back 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, but certainly this hybrid working model, 3 days a week, and certain days you have to be in the office. I think it's important. I think human interaction, definitely face to face, does help. I think certain companies are brilliant at getting that virtual work to a high level, and that connection and communication. Sometimes maybe if you only have an hour, you can actually even be more focused and maximize your time. So that's something. I think there's also the temptation to think just because everyone's in the office that there's really good communication happening, and that isn't always the case. So you have to be conscious of that as well. Sometimes you have to manipulate people's schedules to create opportunities for feedback, to discuss, to analyze, to probe. But yeah, it's definitely a trend I see with people going back in and spending more time together face to face.
I suppose my question is, who's the best you've seen in terms of engaging the hybrid model?
I thought Airbnb. I've done some work with Airbnb, and they went from a model where, like, they had so much budget or pre-COVID, your onboarding was maybe, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks in the States, where you're brought through a very stringent process of getting up to speed with what your role is and your role within a team and the skill set you need to have to execute that. And then they obviously, and like then if they want to do an away weekend, they could go anywhere they want. Like, it was just their answer. Like a lot of those kind of fast scaling tech teams were, if we want to build something, well, let's just throw money into human resources and get people together. And then they went cold turkey. Then they had to let people go, and people reapply for jobs, and then it became all virtual. And they figured that out. They figured out how they would onboard people virtually, how they would create strong teams virtually. And now I think they've got a very, I won't go into details because it's not fair to them, but I think they've got a really good balance and understanding of how to maximize that hybrid and still do face-to-face, still throw money at getting people to travel to a venue, to collaborate, to work, but maximize that and have are very conscious of wasted resource as well.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time. Just a couple more questions for you. What is, in terms of your whole career in sport, not just playing or coaching, what's the biggest lesson you've learned from sport overall?
That nothing teaches you as much as the game. So we talk about feedback in sport, and it's really important, and you get it a lot. But the actual match, the competition, that's the best feedback you can have, and you need to focus on that as a player or as a coach, and make sure that you're better prepped for the next challenge from that. I think there's nothing as that gives you that real sense of where you're at, like the actual match.
What does it take to win?
A lot of people behind the scenes who helping the people in the firing line, in the shop window, execute. And yeah, then I think shared vision, shared plan, and the shared and understanding of the behaviours needed to execute it. That's what it takes to win.
What advice do you give a parent listening that has a child in whatever sport they're playing that has a chance to be elite? What advice do you give them?
Support them. Try and make sure that they keep that passion alive. Try and make sure that they're getting enough positivity from it, whether that's from their playing experience, from being successful, or from the post performance part, where how you communicate with them, how you support them, how you make them understand that um, those setbacks, if they're not winning, are actually part of it, and then how they celebrate success. I think it's really important. I think sometimes really, really, really elite people don't celebrate success for long, and I admire that. And you certainly shouldn't over celebrate success. But I think it is, unless you're very, very tiny minority who don't need to celebrate success to keep going. The vast majority of athletes or coaches I've seen do need that feedback and that reassurance we get from winning, and that shared joy, to make sure you do enjoy it. You do enjoy it. I think that fuels the next part. And it's important to get that positivity negativity ratio as high as possible. And that can be hard when you're not winning, but as parents, we have a big role to play in that.
Barring injury, what's the biggest reason for someone not reaching their potential?
Not feeling part of the journey, I think. Yeah, not being part of the journey, not being made feel important. I think that's another job as leaders, is to make sure everyone feels valued.
Wow, that's a good one. Bernard, you have connections around the world. Who do I need to get on? And if you do say someone, you need to give me help to get them.
Yeah, I've got a very good friend who's coached in a South African guy. His father has written a book about attack, but it's more about skill acquisition, the art of coaching. He's now the attack coach for Leon in the top 14. I felt like AB Zonda. He's a guy I find fascinating, very, very well informed around skill acquisition. He's an expert in skill acquisition, so he's the guy that I now feel I have to help you get on the pod.
Okay, amazing. Look forward to that one. Well, we're going to fly through the Sideline 7, conscious you do have a radio gig soon. It's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. Bernard, I get the sense you are a quotes man, so I'm interested to hear your favourite quote.
All friends are best.
Brilliant. Question 2, best sporting event you've been to?
Paris Olympics in Versailles.
Amazing. Question 3, biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
Been in the medical when I was 22 for a contract, and got a real job and managed to train as pretty close as I could to being professional when I was working to get back in the professional game.
Very good. Question 4, on the flip side, your biggest achievement in or outside of sport?
Heineken Cup for me, winning the European Cup was my biggest achievement.
Amazing. Question 5, advice to your 18-year-old self?
Just enjoy just enjoy the journey. Don't stress. Work hard and follow your passion.
Question 6, dream dinner guest and why?
Actually, I haven't listened. I hadn't thought this one. I thought I would have an answer when I heard it before. I would say Maurice Fitzgerald, Kerry footballer. I admired him massively when he was playing for Kerry. I'd love to meet him.
Amazing. Didn't expect a GA player, but that's interesting. Final question before I let you go. If your life was a book, which it kind of is with Blue Bloods, what chapter would this be called?
Hopefully the middle phase.
The middle phase. We'll leave it at there. Bernard, an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Orla.